Sure, here is the translated text. Hello everyone. Welcome back to our channel. Today we have a truly incredible story to tell. In 1998, Gail Montoya was in a severe car accident that almost cost him his life. During this near-death experience, Gail had an astonishing vision of the future, revealing a crucial event that will occur in August 2024. Get ready for a narrative filled with emotion, mystery, and surprising revelations. Before we begin, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications so you don't miss any details of this unforgettable journey. Let's go. Hello, I'm Gail Montoya, and I have a story to share that completely changed my life. This happened a long time ago, but it still deeply impacts me whenever I think about it. It was in 1998, on a summer night in El Paso, Texas. I was 18 years old and about to start college. I was a young man full of dreams and plans for the future. That night, my best friend Lucas and I were getting ready to go to a party. It was supposed to be just another fun night, but it ended up being the moment that divided my life into before and after. I was born and raised in El Paso, a city on the border with Mexico, rich in culture and life. My parents are of Mexican descent, but I was born in the United States. I grew up in a large, noisy, and loving family. I was always a calm kid, liked to study and read, while Lucas was my opposite. Outgoing and always ready for a party. We met in high school and, despite our differences, became best friends. On that night in 1998, I was excited about the party but also a little anxious. It was the summer before we started college, and I knew many things would change soon. Lucas and I planned to study at the same university. I wanted to be an engineer, and he dreamed of becoming a lawyer. We had so many plans and expectations. I spent the whole afternoon getting ready for the party, choosing a simple shirt I thought was stylish. Lucas showed up at my house wearing a very flashy patterned shirt, which was just like him. We left in my old red sedan, a gift from my parents when I got my driver's license. That car had already been the stage for many of our adventures. If I had known what was about to happen, would I have stayed home that night? It's hard to say. The experience I went through was frightening, but also transformative. It completely changed my view of life, death, and what comes after. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me tell the story from the beginning so you can understand how a simple party night turned into the most intense and surreal experience of my life. It was a typical summer night in El Paso. The day's heat had subsided a bit, but you could still feel that warm desert breeze. Lucas and I left the house around 9 in the evening. The streets were already full of people enjoying the night, heading to bars, restaurants, and parties. I remember we turned up the car radio to the maximum volume. A Latin song that was popular at the time was playing. Lucas sang loudly and off-key, and I laughed. We were so carefree and happy. The party we were going to was at a friend's house on the other side of town. It wasn't far, but we needed to cross downtown. As I drove, we talked about our plans for the future. Lucas was excited about the idea of becoming a lawyer and talked about how he would defend people's rights. I shared my projects of specializing in environmental engineering to help the planet. We were approaching downtown. The lights of the buildings and streets passed quickly by the car window. I remember looking at the clock on the dashboard. It was 9:37 p.m. It's strange how some details get etched in our memory, isn't it? We were approaching an intersection. The light was green for us, so I continued. It all happened so fast. Suddenly, I saw a yellow flash out of the corner of my eye. It was a school bus coming at high speed, and it didn't seem like it was going to stop. I didn't have time to react. 1 second, we were talking and laughing. The next, I heard a deafening sound of metal crashing against metal. The impact was so strong that it felt like all the air had been knocked out of my lungs. The car spun several times. Everything around me turned into a blur of colors and lights. I heard the sound of glass breaking. It must have been the windshield. I felt something warm and wet was running down my face, probably blood. The car finally stopped spinning, and a strange silence took over for a few seconds. Soon I began to hear screams, horns, and sirens in the distance. I tried to move, but my body wouldn't respond. With difficulty, I turned my head and saw Lucas. He was motionless, eyes closed. I tried to call out to him, but no sound came from my mouth. An intense pain started spreading throughout my body, and my vision became blurred. The last thing I remember before losing consciousness was thinking, am I going to die? And then, everything went dark. I don't know how long I was unconscious. It could have been seconds, minutes, or hours. The next thing I noticed was a strange sensation of lightness. The pain had completely vanished, and it felt as if my body weighed nothing. I opened my eyes, or at least I thought I did. I was no longer in the wrecked car. In fact, I wasn't anywhere I could recognize. Around me, there was only a bright white void. There was no ground, sky, or walls, just a soft, welcoming light all around. I looked at myself and realized I could see through my own body, as if it were made of a translucent substance, almost like glass, but flexible. I felt neither cold nor heat, nor the need to breathe. It was an indescribable sensation of freedom. I tried to call out to someone, but no sound came from my mouth. Or rather, I no longer had a mouth. I no longer had a physical body. I was just consciousness, pure thought. That's when I began to understand. Had I died? Was this what happened after death? Strangely, I felt no fear. On the contrary, a deep peace enveloped me, as if all the fears and worries of life had been left behind with my physical body. Suddenly, I sensed a presence. I didn't see anyone, but I knew I wasn't alone in that place. A voice, which seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at the same time, spoke to me. Not with words, but directly into my mind. "Do not fear," said the voice. "You are safe here." I tried to respond, to ask where I was, what had happened. But before I could form the thoughts, the voice continued. "You are at the border between worlds. It is not your time yet. There is much for you to see and learn before you return." Return? So, I wasn't dead. Or at least not permanently. Thousands of questions arose in my mind, but before I could seek answers, I felt a change around me. The white light began to transform. Colors started to emerge, and shapes began to materialize. It was as if the world was being painted around me. In a few moments, I found myself floating above the accident scene. Below, I saw my car completely wrecked, with shards of glass scattered all over the road. Police cars and ambulances had arrived, and I saw paramedics rushing to reach the injured. A crowd was beginning to form around. It was shocking to see the scene from above, like watching a movie, but a movie of my own death. I saw them take my unconscious body out of the car and Lucas being placed on a stretcher. I wanted to scream, to say I was okay, that I was up there, but I knew no one could hear me. As I watched the scene, I felt a gentle force pulling me. It was time to go. Where to, I didn't know, but I was sure I was about to embark on the most incredible journey of my life, or my death. As I was pulled away from the accident scene, I felt a presence beside me. I turned, or at least directed my consciousness, and saw something I will never forget, a being of light. Calling that figure an angel seems inadequate, but it's the closest word I can find to describe it. It was a humanoid form, made entirely of light. It had no wings or halo, like traditional depictions of angels. It was simply a radiant and welcoming presence. The being seemed to be about 30 years old, if it makes sense to speak of age for such an entity, wearing something that resembled a robe, of a bright beige tone, that seemed to radiate warmth and comfort. Its eyes? Well, it's hard to describe. They were like 2 points of intense light, but not blinding. Looking into them was like diving into an ocean of wisdom and unconditional love. The being's face had a gentle smile that made me feel completely accepted and understood. Its long, silky hair fell over its shoulders, shining as if made of strands of liquid gold. Its skin, if I can call it that, was flawless, radiating an aura of total purity. When this entity communicated, it didn't use words, but rather thoughts that emerged directly in my mind. "Welcome, Gale," the entity conveyed. "I am your guide in this journey." I tried to respond and ask questions, but I realized it wasn't necessary. My thoughts and doubts were immediately understood by the entity. "You have many questions," the guide continued. "It's natural. You've gone through a traumatic experience and are now in a realm beyond your current understanding. But do not fear. I am here to guide you and show you things that few have the privilege to see." I felt a wave of gratitude and love emanating from the entity. It was such a pure and intense feeling that it almost hurt. Tears, or their spiritual equivalent, began to flow down my ethereal face. Why me? I managed to ask mentally, why am I having this experience? The guide smiled even more warmly. Every soul has its own path, Gale. Some need this experience to grow, to understand greater truths about existence. You were chosen because you have an important role to play in the future. What you will see and learn here will shape not only your life, but potentially the destiny of many others. I was surprised and a little scared by this revelation. Me? An important role. It seemed hard to believe. The guide must have sensed my hesitation, as its light became even warmer and more comforting. Don't worry about the weight of responsibility now. Everything will become clear at the right time. For now, just observe and learn. Are you ready to begin our journey? I hesitated for a moment, but then I felt a courage I didn't know I possessed. I felt it, or at least I thought I did. Then come, said the guide. There is much to see, and with that we began to move. I wasn't walking or flying in the traditional sense. It was more like space itself was moving around us. We were about to embark on a journey that would forever change my understanding of life, death, and everything in between. As we moved through the ethereal space, I began to see something forming in the distance. At first, it seemed like just a glow on the horizon, but as we got closer, I realized it was much more than that. It was a city, but not an ordinary city. It was a metropolis made entirely of light. Imagine the most impressive skyscrapers you've ever seen. Now imagine them built with material that looked like liquid crystal, shining with all the colors of the rainbow. The structures didn't seem solid like the buildings we know. They undulated gently, as if they were alive and breathing. There were bridges of light connecting the buildings and what seemed to be vehicles of pure energy moving between them. What is this place? I asked my guide mentally. This is one of the many cities on the spiritual plane, he replied. Here, souls who have completed their journey on Earth come to rest, learn, and prepare for their next experiences. As we approached, I could see figures moving through the city. They were like my guide, beings of light in vaguely humanoid forms. Some seemed to be conversing in groups. Others were alone, apparently in deep contemplation. The souls here don't have physical bodies, as you know, my guide explained. They take on forms that are comfortable for them, based on their memories and self-identity. I noticed that some of the figures seemed brighter and more defined than others. When I asked about this, my guide explained. The brightness you see reflects the level of spiritual evolution of each soul. The more evolved the soul, the brighter and more defined its energetic form. We passed something that seemed to be a huge park, but instead of trees and grass, there were forms of energy that moved and changed color constantly. It was as if nature itself was alive and conscious. This is a place of healing and renewal, my guide said. Souls come here to recover from difficult experiences they had on Earth. We continued our journey through the city. We passed structures that looked like schools or universities, where groups of souls were gathered, apparently absorbing knowledge in a way I couldn't fully comprehend. Learning never stops, my guide explained. Even after leaving the physical plane, souls continue to evolve and acquire wisdom. At one point, we passed something that looked like a huge amphitheater. Thousands of beings of light were gathered, all focused on a central figure that radiated such intense light, it was almost difficult to look at directly. What is happening there? I asked. That is a very evolved soul sharing knowledge and experiences, the guide replied. We might call it a spiritual master. We continued on our journey through the city. Each new place we visited awakened in me admiration and questions. There were places that resembled laboratories, where souls worked with energies and forces that I didn't. I could understand. There were also spaces reminiscent of art galleries, but the works were made of pure light and emotion. Creativity and expression are essential here, my guide explained. Each soul has the chance to explore and expand its talents and passions. As we observed all this, I noticed something peculiar. Despite all the activity and movement, a deep sense of peace permeated the environment. There was no rush, stress, or visible conflicts. How is this possible? I asked. On Earth, such an active city would be chaotic. My guide smiled, or at least that was the impression I got. Here, every soul is in tune with its greater purpose. There is no ego or desire for power over others. Everyone collaborates for the common good and their own evolution. I was amazed by this idea. A society based on cooperation and mutual growth, without the complications and conflicts we know on Earth. As we were about to leave the city, my guide turned to me. Remember, Gale, what you saw here is just a glimpse of what is possible. Each plane of existence has its own wonders and challenges. This city is an example of what souls can create when they work in harmony. I felt deeply touched and transformed by what I had seen, but something told me that our journey was far from over. There was much more to see and learn. Leaving the city of light behind, we headed towards a completely different landscape. To my left, a vast field stretched as far as the eye could see, but it was not an ordinary field. It was a place of indescribable beauty, filled with vibrant colors and pure, innocent energy. The sky above the field was an impossible blue, deeper and more vivid than anything I had ever seen on Earth. Clouds of fantastic shapes floated lazily, changing color smoothly, from pink to gold, from gold to lavender. On the ground, what seemed to be grass was actually a myriad of tiny lights, undulating like an ocean of stars. Each movement created waves of colors that spread in all directions. But what caught my attention the most were the children. Dozens, perhaps hundreds of small forms of light ran and played across the field. Their laughter was like music, creating waves of joy that I could literally see spreading through the air. "What is this place?" I asked my guide, amazed. "This is the Field of Innocence," he replied. "It's a place of rest and healing for the younger souls." I looked closer and realized that not all the forms were human children. There were also what seemed to be young animals, puppies of light chasing ethereal kittens, small bright birds flying in graceful formations. "Do all forms of life have a soul?" I asked, surprised. My guide nodded. "Every consciousness, every form of life, has its own divine spark. Here, they coexist in perfect harmony." As we watched, I saw something that especially moved me. A group of light children was playing with what seemed to be a huge glowing dog. The animal radiated love and protection, and the children laughed joyfully as they climbed on its back. "That is a spiritual guide," my angel explained. "It takes the form that is most comforting for the children." We continued to observe the scenes of pure joy and innocence. I saw light children building castles with what seemed to be sand made of stars. Others danced in circles, their movements creating complex patterns of light in the air. "Why do some souls come here instead of the city we saw before?" I asked. "Each soul has different needs," my guide replied. "Some, especially those who had short or difficult lives on Earth, need this environment of pure innocence and joy to heal and prepare for their next journeys." I thought about all the children who die young on Earth, in accidents, illnesses, or violence. It was comforting to know there was a place like this waiting for them. As I contemplated this, I noticed something curious. Occasionally, one of the light children seemed to flicker and disappear for a moment before reappearing. "What is happening to them?" I asked. "Ah, you noticed," said my guide, with a tone that seemed approving. "Some of these souls are preparing to reincarnate. When they flicker, they are making brief visits to the physical plane, familiarizing themselves with their future parents or environments." I was fascinated by this idea. The idea that souls could go and transition between planes as we prepare for new existences was both a peculiar and reassuring experience. Before we moved away from the Field of Innocence, my mentor turned to me. "Gale, remember that the purity and joy you witnessed here are present at all levels of existence. On Earth, you sometimes forget this, but these qualities are always there, waiting to be rediscovered." I nodded in agreement, deeply moved. As we moved away, I cast one last glance at the radiant field. The laughter of the light children echoed in my mind, a reminder of the pure joy that transcends our earthly understanding. Our next destination was a place that made my scholarly heart leap with excitement. Before us appeared an immense structure, resembling a library, but on a scale that defied imagination. The building seemed to be made of a crystalline material that reflected and refracted light in impossible ways. Its towers rose so high, they seemed to merge with the very sky. Huge doors of pure gold opened silently as we approached. As we entered, I was left breathless metaphorically, as I no longer had a physical body to breathe. The interior was even more impressive than the exterior. Endless corridors stretched in all directions, filled with seemingly infinite shelves. But instead of books, the shelves were filled with what appeared to be scrolls of light. "Welcome to the Celestial Library," announced my guide. Here are recorded all lives, all thoughts, all actions of every soul that has ever existed. I was amazed. You mean every person who ever lived has a record here? Not just people, replied the guide. Every conscious being and every form of life has its record here. From the smallest bacteria to the most complex civilization in distant galaxies. I approached one of the scrolls. It emitted a soft glow. When I focused on it, images began to form in my mind. It was like watching a movie of someone's life, but not just external events. I could feel the thoughts, emotions, and motivations behind each action. Is this someone's life? I asked, astonished. Yes, my guide replied. Each scroll contains the complete story of a soul. Their past lives, their lessons learned, their challenges overcome, and those yet to come. I noticed beings of light moving through the library. Some seemed to be studying the scrolls intently. Others were in groups discussing what they had read. Who are they? I asked. More evolved souls, my guide explained. They come here to study, to better understand the patterns of existence. Some are preparing to be guides for other souls. Others are planning their next incarnations. We walked among the shelves, and I felt increasingly amazed. There were sections that seemed to contain the history of entire planets, of civilizations that had risen and fallen over billions of years. How is this possible? I asked. How can all this information be stored? My guide smiled, or at least that was the feeling I had. What you see is just a representation that your mind can comprehend. In truth, this library exists outside of time and space as you know them. All information, all knowledge exists simultaneously here. We continued our exploration, and we came to a section that seemed different from the others. The scrolls here appeared to be incomplete, with parts of them still forming. This is the section of ongoing lives, my guide explained. Here are the records of souls that are currently incarnated. I was curious. Is my record here? Yes, the guide replied. But you are not allowed to see it now. Knowing too much about your own future could interfere with your free will and the lessons you still need to learn. I agreed, understanding the wisdom in that. As we continued our journey through the library, a profound sense of reverence enveloped. Here was the entire history of existence, all the triumphs and tragedies, all the lessons learned and yet to be learned. Before we left, my guide turned to me once more. Remember, Gale. Every action, every thought, every choice we make is recorded here. Not for judgment, but as part of the great tapestry of existence. Every life is precious. Every experience has value. We left the celestial library, but the images and sensations I experienced there remained etched in my consciousness. I knew that somehow, this experience would fundamentally change the way I would live my life from then on. As I left the majestic celestial library behind, my guide led me to a space that seemed unlike anything I had ever seen. Everything we had witnessed up to that moment was completely different. We felt as if we were floating in a vast cosmic void, surrounded by distant stars and nebulas. I asked, filled with a mixture of expectation and apprehension. Now, Gale, you will have a glimpse. Tempo, senti uma sensação de esperança e possibilidade. Obrigado por me mostrar isso, disse o meu guia. Agora entendo que o futuro é campo de potencial infinito. E cabe a mim, e a todos nós, escolher como moldá-lo. Meu guia assentiu, e com gesto suave, o vazio ao nosso redor começou a se dissipar. O vazio ao nosso. Senti-me sendo puxado de volta à realidade, mas com uma nova perspectiva. Ao abrir os olhos, percebi que estava de volta ao meu próprio tempo e lugar, mas com uma visão renovada sobre o que o futuro poderia ser. As time passed, a wave of hope and determination enveloped me. Whatever my role in the grand scheme of things, I was ready to embrace it. After the intense experience of glimpsing the future, I noticed a subtle change around me. The vastness of the cosmos began to unravel, and I sensed that our journey was coming to an end. It's time to return, Gale, said my angelic guide, his voice resonating with a mix of tenderness and seriousness. A flood of conflicting emotions overwhelmed me. On one hand, I was deeply grateful for everything I had seen and learned. On the other, the thought of leaving that realm of light and knowledge filled me with unexpected sadness. Do I really have to go back? I asked, surprised by my own hesitation. My guide smiled understandingly. Yes, Gale, your journey on Earth is not yet over. There is much you need to do, experience and learn. I felt it, understanding the wisdom in his words, but still with a heaviness in my heart, or whatever the spiritual equivalent of that was. What will it be like? Returning? I asked, a bit anxious. It will be a transition, my guide explained. You will start to feel the weight of your physical body again. It might be a bit uncomfortable at first, but it's a natural process. As he spoke, I began to notice a change. The lightness I had experienced throughout this journey started to be replaced by a feeling of heaviness. It was as if an invisible force was pulling me back to Earth. Remember, Gale, my guide said, his voice beginning to sound distant. You will carry the essence of this experience with you, even if the details may become hazy. Trust your instincts, follow your heart, and always remember the love and light you experienced here. I tried to respond, to thank him, but found I could no longer form words. The feeling of weight increased, and I began to feel pain. A physical pain I hadn't felt since the moment of the accident. The images around me began to dissolve, as if being washed away by a wave of darkness. For a moment, I felt panic. I was losing the connection to that realm of light and knowledge. I was returning to the physical world with all its limitations and challenges. But then, in the midst of the darkness, I felt one last wave of love and comfort from my guide. It wasn't words, but a pure feeling of support and encouragement. I relaxed, allowing myself to be taken back. The transition was swift, yet it seemed to last an eternity. I felt as if I were falling through layers and layers of reality, each one bringing me closer to my physical body. And then suddenly, I opened my eyes. The bright light made me blink several times. Gradually, my vision came into focus, and I recognized where I was. A hospital room. The smell of antiseptic. The constant beeping of machines. The feel of rough sheets against my skin. All of it hit me at once. I tried to move and felt pain. My whole body ached. A cruel reminder of the accident. But I was alive. I had returned. A nurse entered the room and, seeing me awake, quickly called a doctor. Soon I was surrounded by a medical team, all asking questions, checking my vital signs. But I barely heard them. My mind was still filled with the images and sensations of the journey I had just taken. I knew I had experienced something extraordinary, something that would change my life forever. As the doctors continued their work, I closed my eyes for a moment. In the darkness behind my eyelids, for a brief instant, I thought I saw a flash of light. A final nod from my angelic guide. I opened my eyes again, ready to face whatever came next. My journey back to life was just beginning. I spent several weeks in the hospital recovering from the injuries of the accident. It was a period of physical pain, but also of deep reflection. Each passing day, the memories of my near-death experience seemed to become a bit more nebulous, like a dream that fades upon waking, but the essence of what I lived and the lessons I learned remained with me. The doctors were surprised by my rapid recovery. They spoke of a medical miracle, but I knew it was more than that. I felt as if every cell in my body had been renewed, energized by the light I experienced on the other side. Lucas, my friend who was in the car with me, survived the accident, but his injuries were more severe than mine. He was in a coma for several weeks. When he finally awoke, we discovered that he had lost the memory of the accident and the days leading up to it. Part of me wondered if he had also gone through something similar to what I experienced, but he didn't remember anything. When I was finally discharged from the hospital, I returned home with a new outlook on life. Things that once seemed so important, like money, status, and material possessions, now seemed insignificant compared to what I had seen and experienced. I began to notice small things that had previously gone unnoticed. The beauty of a sunset, the smile of a stranger on the street, the sound of the wind in the trees. Every moment felt precious, every interaction with another person an opportunity to share love and understanding. My plans for the future changed drastically. Although I still wanted to attend college, my focus was now different. Instead of pursuing a career that would guarantee me wealth and status, I started looking for ways to make a difference in the world, to help people, to promote the unity and understanding I saw as possible in the future that was shown to me. I began to meditate regularly, trying to reconnect with that sense of peace and unity I experienced during my spiritual journey. Sometimes, during these meditations, I had flashes of insight that seemed to come directly from that other plane of existence. My family and friends noticed the change in me. Some thought it was just a phase, a reaction to the trauma of the accident. Others were intrigued by my new perspective and sought my advice and opinions. Whenever I could, I shared the lessons I learned about the importance of love, compassion, and unity. I talked about how every action, every choice we make, has an impact on the grand scheme of things. Sometimes people understood. Other times, they looked at me with skepticism. But I knew I was planting seeds that might one day bloom. As time went by, I began to feel a strong intuition about the future. I knew something important would happen on August 10th. I didn't know exactly what, but I was sure it would be something significant. As I prepared for that day, I continued living my life as best as I could, trying to incorporate the lessons I learned into every aspect of my daily life. I knew the future wasn't set in stone, that it depended on the choices we all make every day. Looking back at that summer night in 1998, I realize how an experience that could have been just a tragedy turned into the most significant and transformative event of my life. The accident that almost took my life ended up giving me a new perspective on what it truly means to live. I don't know exactly what the future holds, neither for me nor for the world, but I know that each of us has the power to make a difference, to contribute to a better future. And it's with this certainty that I face each new day, grateful for the second chance I received and determined to make the best possible use of it. My near-death journey may have ended that night, but my true journey, of living fully with purpose and love, was just beginning. So, what did you think of this incredible story? Leave your opinion in the comments. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel and activate the notification bell to be notified of each new video. Let's bring hope to more people that there is life beyond what the eyes can see.